Hello, everyone. Welcome to another recorded discussion in Assessment and Learning 2. And for this topic, we will be learning about grading and reporting. And here are the learning outcomes for this topic. You will be able to explain the function of grading and reporting, distinguish what is criterion and norm reference grading, compute grades in accordance with the current TEPED policy and grading system, and cite points to observe when reporting students' progress to both students and the parents. Now, before we proceed to the details of this topic, let us have this picture first, in which it can be shown that the accountability has shifted over time. In older days, parents question the child for the bad performance. However, in today's classroom setup, the blame is sometimes directed to us teachers instead. It's not to point out any generational gap, but it somehow reminds us that despite these changing dynamics, teachers must remain proactive. We should know how to communicate clearly, build partnership with our parents, with the parents of our learners, and guide our students responsibly to ensure that they learn well in our class. Another image I would like to you to reflect as well is in this very classic meme in which we say grade is just a number. And yes, this is something we say when we feel that our grades are slipping, but in reality, grades do play an important role. They're not about labeling our worth. Yes, that's true. However, they are clear indicators of our effort, our learning, and our readiness for the next level. So instead of saying grade is just a number, let's treat this number as a feedback we can learn from and improve on. Now, here are the things that we need to consider when discussing assessment before any assessment to our students. And this is according to Babowski 2017. First is explain where the test fits the bigger picture. So it would be better if they know how they should be rated at the same time when where components of grading system will that activity or will that test be computed or be recorded. Share how the test results will affect their overall class grade. So, if possible, we can also provide during the class orientation the different weighing or the different grading system so that they will know whether for this quiz will it be 45%, 25% of their overall grade. Preempt questions about what their data will look like and who will see it. So we are bound to Data Privacy Act and we do not share our entire class record to our students. We do not present it on the screen. We can only have a one-on-one counseling or a one-on-one consultation with the student with regards to their numerical grades and even with their assessment scores. That's why the best practice is that we do not share anymore the score in the entire classroom. We can only provide feedback as to who is the highest and generally address the percentage of those who pass, but it should not be as individual scoring. We do not also shout out those who are in the lowest, especially those who are struggling. Another is that we take the fear out of the testing jargon. So before assessing, we do not say we will have evaluation. Let us not also use the word assessment. Another thing also is that we have to be careful with the word summative assessment because summative assessment, a summative test in The basic curriculum is the long test or the review test before they have periodical exam. However, for a summative assessment is already the totality. So we need to be careful with using those words or those jargon because the meaning may be different and the way they answer the assessment may also be different in their end. We clarify the testing environment. Sometimes this will not be also that of a problem because where the classroom usually where the classroom activities are happening is also their examination rooms. But if in the event that it will be changed or there will be a schedule different classrooms, then it is our responsibility to provide the information to them beforehand or before the exam, one day before the exam. If we also like to have a computer based assessment, make any transitions to these devices as easy as possible. So if we intend to have a computer or a website based assessment, make it make it clear that it should be prepared before the exact examination time. Also, provide the dates for the next assessment. We may provide surprise quizzes, but let us not give surprise exam, as to this may also create surprise, or we may also be surprised with their scores. So the idea is for summative assessment, they should always be informed, but there might be formative assessment that we are up to provide unannounced task. Now, here are the different functions of grading and reporting. First is it enhances students' learning when we clarify the instructional objectives to them, and of course, to show their strength and improve their points of. There can also be a points of improvement. Next is it reports to parents and guardian. So when we communicate this progress and objectives to them, they also engage in the learning process of their children. Remember that it takes the whole village to raise a child, so good partnership with the parents would also promote, would also see, or would also make sure that ensure that we support them in promoting their children's progress. Next is the third is it provides administrative and guidance usage, which is, for example, we make use of the grades for promotion, for graduation, and for listing or for the honor list. Also, it provides the achievement for the total for the school. Although in today's curriculum, it's not anymore that highlighted, but it will also tell us the number of passers or especially the number of achievers in the class or in the school in totality. It supports, of course, educational and personal counseling. These are the components of grading, and this is according to Aeration and Russell in 2008, in which it should have standards of comparison, aspect of performance, and the weight of different kinds of evidence. So let's start with the standards of comparison. So remember, we can have a norm reference grading. We can also have a criterion reference grading and a self-reference. So self-reference are sometimes non-graded, but it will all depends on your discretion. Norm reference grading is when you base the grading in the performance of the class, and criterion is when you base it in the competency based or in the outcome based approach. It is all up to you as to what would be your point of grading system or your standards of comparison. But the best practice is that for norm reference grading, we use this for formative assessments, and for criterion reference, should be used for summative assessment. We do not need to provide, or we do not need to add 20 points for a 50 item or 50 points exam just for them to pass if it is a summative assessment. Because in that case, at 20 points, on the top of 50 points is not a clear competency based practice. However, for a quiz that will result an average of 4 to 6 out of 10, we may consider deleting number of items just to provide a norm reference scores. Now, again, it is all up to you as to what would be your discretion and grading system, but remember that we all should be in the fulfillment of the competencies that we ask them or that we provide to them, since if our concern is constructive alignment. Now, for aspects of performance, it will be based on academic performance such as quizzes, tests, assignments, projects, and performance. A best practice of this is when we have our classroom orientation, it is always best to give them a picture of what would incorporate or what would be recorded in their written work on the performance task and of course in the quarterly assessment exams. Now, there is a debate as to should motivation, effort, and participation be graded. My answer to this is it will reflect on the efforts, on the fulfillment of the different learning outcomes we have shared to the class. Should you include motivation points in your class record or effort or participation? It is all up to you. However, I would say that it should not constitute the totality of other written or performance based activity. If you wish to add another cell or another column for classroom engagement or participation, you may, so long that you also have a scoring rubrics for such scores. We also have the weighing of evidences in which we provide the percentage of each component. So stipulated in the Department Order 8 series of 2015, you can see here the different components and of course the percentage depending on the discipline. So remember this, that for language, araling panlipunan, and edukasyon sa pagpapakatao, the written work is 30%, 50%, and 20% for performance tasks and quarterly assessments, respectively. It will be different for science and math, and of course for a skilled type of subjects which are in MAPE, EPP, and TLE. This is also the criteria or the grading system offered for the senior high curriculum, in which core subjects has different computation with all other subjects and with work immersions, and of course academic track is computed different with TVL or other similar tracks under technical, vocational, and livelihood education. Now, there is some amendments as to this DepEd order policy, which was dated in the DepEd order 31 series of 2020. This was to address the continuing learning system we have during the pandemic, in which it's not possible to conduct a assessment or a face-to-face quarterly exams. That's why it is being merged into two assessment components only, which is only written work and performance task. And this is for the senior high school curriculum. Now, why do we need to communicate assessment results? It is to promote accountability on the part of the learner, of course, also of the teacher. It also provides institutional memory as to how many accomplished or how many achievers do we have and how many of those who need remediations. It helps learner understand areas for improvement and supports accurate and transparent communication. Here are points in communicating assessment. These are just guidelines or these are just mere suggestions. In the field, if you happen to find the best practice that suits the culture and of course the practices in that school, you may also opt to apply. First is establish learning outcomes. That means to say you go always go back to the fulfillment of those unpacked learning outcomes we have in the competency to make sure that our assessment results are are helpful. Second is document assessment process. It is always best that you have a printed e-class record, although nowadays we have already the e-class record which is automated. But in the event that there will be technical issues with our electronic file, it is best to secure a printed class record in our end. We also relate results to the fulfillment of the learning outcome. Note decisions made during assessment process. So for example, you change the number of items or you decide to make another remedial exams, you have to provide information to your students or if it is a shared agreement between you and between the teacher and the student, then that decision should also be shared to everyone. Next is when giving feedback. As you will know, feedback is important, is needed in grading and reporting. When giving feedback, we start with positive feedback if it is possible. Know the student, especially the parent you are talking to. What are their expectations in the meetup or in the meeting? Usually, it will be all about consultation about their children's performance. Be specific and refer to the competencies. Give examples. You engage the student and the parent. Do not do monologue. You also let them speak. And when they speak, you listen actively. You allow them to explain. You may validate it later and also avoid judgmental statements. So, this is a Johari window framework for giving example in which we say that if we're looking for high competence, if we promote high competence and of course high self-awareness, the student will have a fulfillment of the awareness of the strength. However, if the student is not that competent but has high self-awareness, the awareness for the area of development is also high. Now, we do not want to see this window in which we have low self-awareness and low competence because it means that the student is sometimes disengaged in our class. Now, when reporting student progress, we may use these different documents. We can use the report card, which is Form 138, or today it is called Form 9, School Form 9, and School Form 137 for the permanent records. And today this is called SF10 or School Form 10. And of course, the written progress reports, we can have it the anecdotal records weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. Here are the different tips for effective parent-teacher conference, especially for giving grades. Announce card giving dates early, as much as possible, a week before or 2 weeks before, since most of our parents are also working parents, it would give them some time to look for a schedule. Be positive, be objective, listen well, avoid I know everything attitude. Some of the parents won't buy that attitude. Communicate effectively. Don't discuss other students. Focus only on the learner. In the event that it will be the parent who will be asking for the performance, you construct positively the statement in a way that it is not offensive, and at the same time you will not be able to divulge any information for that different learner. And of course, end the conversation with encouragement. Encourage them to motivate also their children. Provide, but it doesn't. You don't have to be their advisor, since of course they are already parents. A good encouragement would may start with posing positive attitudes from the. You can see positive attitudes from the learner, so that they will also motivate their student to improve. Why reports Why should we report assessment result? Of course, students are our stakeholders and they should know. However, the best practice in basic education curriculum is that for card giving, we do not give directly the card to the student. We ask the parent to come to school so that they will also attach their signature, and that's also one way to check whether they are involved in their children's learning progress or academic endeavors. And also, we report assessment results because it improves achievement, and feedback also should be objective, transparent, and respectful. An important tip that we have always to remember in having parents teacher consultation or in parents teacher conference with the learner is that it takes a whole village to raise a child, and the burden of the bad performance of the student should not be blame only to us, especially if we are reflective enough to improve our strategies. Hence, asking partnership with the parents to promote positive learning with their children is the best practice. So I hope that you have learned, and you will be able to answer the formative assessment we have in the Google Classroom. Thank you.